today's topic, how to write legislation. Um, Feel free to go ahead and just raise your hand at any point during the session, and I'll just pause and answer your question. No need to wait until the very end because there'll be a lot of information that we're going to cover. So let me go ahead and please hold. Share my screen. Can everybody see that okay?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Okay. So in order to not block the content, I've got to squeeze this preview screen really small here. So like I said, if you have any questions, actually, hold on, let me stop my screen share really quick because I think I'm not in the right spot on my presentation. No, I don't know where it went. Thanks y'all for being patient. Normally this is fine, but you know, under pressure, technology caves. Okay. Let's try this again. I'm in the right spot. Cool. Okay. Yeah, so like I mentioned, if at any point during the presentation you have any questions, feel free to use the raise hand function or go ahead and put your question in the chat if you don't want to share it out loud. And so we'll just go ahead and get started. I'm pretty sure that you all know who I am now, but if you don't know or need a reminder, my name is Holly Mays, and I'm the Assistant Director of Governmental Affairs with Associated Students. I'm one of the advisors to Senate. And previously, I held the position of the Legislative Liaison. Thanks, Esme. I previously held the position of the Legislative Liaison, and in that role, I updated the legal code. I did advising on legal code updates and legislation updates, and so that has kind of been my niche within AS, along with, of course, working with you all as senators, and I also work with the Committee on Committees and Lobby Corps, and so that's kind of a little bit of why we're here today talking about how to write legislation. My background is also in political science, which helps. So I wanted to share at the beginning this quote here from the Senate website that talks about the role of the Senate. As you all know, within the legislative branch of our governmental structure, you all have the power of legislative initiative, which is where this writing legislation piece of your responsibility kind of comes into play. So this quote here says the Associated Student Senate is a group of elected representatives which serves as the policy-making body of Associated Students. And that policy-making body is going to be key for the remainder of our presentation today. In this quote here, they also highlighted as the governing body, we strive to open lines of communication between students, the administration, and our greater community. Members of the Senate seek to be proactive in addressing student needs and providing and facilitating services and resources that enhance the UCSB experience. And so that kind of is a great segue into this portion here that I want to talk about, which is what I call the power of the student voice. And so, like I mentioned, you all as the legislative branch have this power of legislative initiative. And so I want to talk about the Senate as a body is a part of a greater community within UCSB, absolutely. And so one of the things that we talk about, or we're going to talk about, is how you're connecting with other resources, and how that comes into play is talking about if you're connecting with other folks that are doing the work related to the resolution that you're wanting to do, if it's on like environmental issues, like who can you connect with, what other entities on campus. But I just want to highlight this piece here at the very beginning. This legislative initiative is super impactful both to the association and to the campus. In the early 80s, there was a shared governance letter, if you will, that established this relationship that you all, as the association and particularly as the Senate, have with the campus and the governance of the campus. And it cannot be understated that this student voice is super impactful both to, like I mentioned, to the campus and to the association. I think I see something in the chat. Okay. Thank you. May I let him in now? Okay. And so, like I mentioned, that the Senate is a part of a larger community with UCSB and Isla Vista, and even within our community in Santa Barbara and Isla Vista, and even within the state of California. And so I want to highlight these different relationships that you all are going to have from your position as a senator. And we'll talk about this a little bit more later in the week when we talk about the role of a Senate liaison. But just wanted to highlight these different areas that you could connect with. Okay, so now that that's prefaced a little bit, I want to talk a little bit more about the nitty-gritty, if you will, about resolution and bill writing. So we're going to start with talking about what the difference between a bill and a resolution is. And so the AS Legal Code is comprised entirely of bills that have been written by you all as senators. And so on the left-hand side here, you'll see we have this reddish circle with the word bill. And this highlights the unique pieces of a bill in that how are they different from a resolution. And so bills are amendments to the bylaws or our standing policies and procedures. And I say amendments because this could mean you're literally amending something that is already written and you're changing it. So this could look like a BCU that you're a liaison to needs to add or take away a position. And this could also mean amending the standing policies in that you all draft or author an entirely new standing policy, you create an entirely new BCU, that would also be considered an amendment. And so that is how that is differentiated from a resolution. And also with the bill, the changes are going to last what we call indefinitely. So that means they are in legal code until it is amended again. And so this is contrasted with, on the right-hand side, you'll see with the blue circle of a resolution. Resolutions term out at the end of each of your terms. So they last until your Senate ends. And so this is important to note for any resolutions that you're wanting continued from last year. If you knew students that worked on previous resolutions that you're wanting to have carried over. For example, there are resolutions written about like, safe space procedures within our like physical spaces, which of course isn't the most pressing now considering we're not on campus, but that could be an example of a resolution that continues over. Also unique to a bill is that all constitutional amendments begin with a bill. So if you're wanting to create a new lock-in, if you're wanting to create new Senate positions, for example, last year's Senate created or they helped facilitate the creation of 2 additional Senate seats. And I say facilitated the creation of specifically because the authors of those of that bill, they authored the bill to create the 2 additional Senate seats, and then that language went onto the ballot that you all as students then voted on, and that passage then created the 2 additional seats and therefore created that constitutional amendment. And so that is unique to bill specifically, is this piece of being able to amend the Constitution as well as amending the bylaws and the standing policies. And then changes and bills last indefinitely. And then to go further into on the right-hand side, resolutions, like I mentioned earlier, are going to term out. They only last until your term ends. Your resolutions can be either positional or directional, and we can talk about that a little bit more, but a positional resolution is a resolution that takes a particular stance, right? So if you're condemning white supremacy, if you're condemning homophobia, for example, those are considered taking a position. And then if you would like a directional resolution, that would mean that you're, like, for example, there was a resolution that directed Maricela to find a permanent location for the bike shop. So you're asking the association to take a direction on something. And that ties in with the very first point on this Venn diagram here, is providing direction to staff and to each other. And so there was a directional resolution directing senators to create Facebook pages for their offices. That's an example of a directional resolution. And you can also have resolutions that are both. And so we'll get further into the types of bills and resolutions, and I'll actually provide you all with a handout that I created that is a guide to legislation, if you will, and it'll talk about the different types of bills and resolutions that you can choose as you're writing, and then it'll have a little bit more information, and so you won't need to remember all of it, but I'll send that over to you all. And then the things that are shared amongst both pieces of legislation, if you will, is that they're both capable of association-wide change and influence. And I know that you all may think that it sounds super corny when I say that, but the work that you all are doing makes a really big impact on the association and on our campus. You all are doing super important and meaningful work. And regardless of what type of legislation you choose, that still stands. Both bills and resolutions also take effect immediately. And also both bills and resolutions work to engage the campus and our community. So next I want to talk about the legislation template. So if you're thinking about in terms of planning out your work, right? So you were, you potentially had a platform that you ran on, or maybe you had ideas for changes that you wanted to implement once you started in office as a senator, and now you've thought a little bit more about your like short term, your more your longer term goals, and thinking about, okay, how can I plug in to my schedule and my time, the research and all the input that I want to put into my bills and resolutions, and now I'm ready to sit down and write. And so the first thing that you're going to want to take a look at is this resolution and bill template. And so this is a generic template that I actually created 2.5 years ago when I started. And I say I created because there was one already in existence, but if there's anything that will indicate something about the quirkiness of my personality, is that I added all of these like cells in here. So now when you type it in, it doesn't like mess with all of the formatting. And so when you go to type in the title and your name under the author in the second, it's all just going to fill in really neatly. So I get really excited about things like that. So anyway, but this resolution and bill template here, like I mentioned, is going to have space for all the information that you're going to need to include in order to submit this piece of legislation to the IVP, and then to have it on your agenda during the Senate meeting. So the things that you're going to want to include are going to be the title, number one. So we'll talk a little bit about like the structure of how the bill is written. And the title is one of the three things that you're going to need. And the title is like an underrated important thing because the title is how we reference this material later on. So, you know, if somebody 5 years from now comes to me and they're like, hey, do you remember this bill that was written about this particular topic? And so we can use like keyword searches to find that bill that they were referring to. And when we keep it in our records, we see that title that helps us indicate what topics were discussed during that time. And then the next thing you're going to want to have is an author and a second. I believe on the template that is circulated amongst you all, this term author has been replaced with first. So there's a first author and a second author. But regardless of the name that you attach to it, you're going to need two authors for every piece of legislation. And it's important too that if you're collaborating with the BCU on a change, again, like I mentioned, we'll talk about this in our presentation later this week about your role as a Senate liaison. And your part of your responsibilities with them is to help them author bills. And so that's just a piece of that there. This piece about the number, you're going to want to leave blank because Tiana and I will help fill that in. The two of us help coordinate the numbering of the bills. Tiana assigns the number and then I record them in our bill book. And so you won't necessarily know what order in which she received them or what number is next. So you can go ahead and leave that blank. And then the bill type you're going to want to include, which is going to be if it is a bylaw change, a standing policies and procedures change, etc. Like I said, I'll include the various different types of bills and resolutions to you in the guide that I created. And then the vote also there. But also no pressure if you're not entirely familiar with it yet. The key pieces you're going to want to include in this template are just going to be the title, the author, and the second, and then we can work to fill in the rest as you become more comfortable. And then these other sections here about the Constitution and Bylaws recommendation and committee recommendation, those are for the Internal Affairs Committee, which is a subcommittee of the Senate. And then if there's any committee recommendations, they will put that in these two sections here. And then the other two important pieces at the very tail end of this here are if your legislation is going to be student sponsored. So if there are any students that are wanting to put their name as a sponsor on this legislation, that is the square there where you will put their names, and you can put as many as you like. And having their name as a student sponsor will allow them to speak on behalf of this piece of legislation during a Senate session rather than them speaking during public forum. And this could be students that have helped like co-craft the legislation. Maybe you connect with a student that is really familiar on a topic and you are helping support them through helping them author this bill and resolution, but they really want to elaborate on the topic. That would be a great spot for their name to be placed as a student sponsor, or if you're helping amend the legislation for your BCU, you could have your chair, your vice chair, etc., under the student sponsor. And then lastly, if there is a fiscal impact, meaning you create a new BCU and you would like funding allocated, or you've written a resolution for like a school supply drive and you would like funding for that, that would be this place here under fiscal impact that you would put the amount that you are wanting and the account that it's coming from. And staff can help you figure out what account it should come from. And if you're not sure, you can leave it blank and we can help work that out as we work with you to get the bill passed and reported and things like that. So I want to talk a little bit next about the structure of the legislation that you're writing. I won't get too deep into recommendations about things like grammar or anything like that. I just want to cover the basics, which would be, like I mentioned before, having a title, and then the two clauses that you're going to want to include to have a well-written bill and resolution. And these two types of clauses are, as mentioned here, are preamble clauses and result